Now we're recording. Let's do that again.
Merhaba arkadaşlar. Bugünkü video içeriğimde sizlere yaklaşık 2-3 sene önce tesadüfen tanıştığım bir sinemacı arkadaşımla yaptığım söyleşiyi paylaşmak istiyorum.
I was beginning film school when I had to leave for a family memorial. That's what led to the unearthing of the archives of my great-grandfather, Jacques. It turned out he had invented one of the most revolutionary movie cameras of all time, the Bolex.
If a cinematographer is a magician, a Bolex is the best box of tricks ever.
You just listen to the noise it makes.
I got real good at winding up real quick.
They're nice and light and you can do a lot of camera moves with them.
Once it's in your hands, you can use your body like a tripod.
What's the ideal tool to learn the craft of filmmaking?
I was consumed by the idea that maybe it wasn't too late to get to know Jacques. His journal was almost like a treasure map, going all the way back to the early days of film. Jacques was known as an early filmmaker in Switzerland.
Okay, Alyssa, can you please tell me about how you find the ways to make your documentary into being a real project? I mean, I know that it's not easy to find funding and budget or finance for a documentary film. It's easier for a narrative film, but since it's a documentary film, and in the world, documentary films are not funded and financed easily. So I know actually how you came to find the funding, and I know it was not easy. It took a long time, and I'm aware of such stories because most people are trying to find their own ways to fund their projects if those are documentary projects. So can you tell us about your adventure with funding your own project?
Yeah, definitely. I think, like you said, everyone does it a different way. There's no specific way. In my situation, we didn't have funding from the family to really fund this big of a documentary because my great-grandfather hadn't been involved with the Bolex since the 30s, so there was no family fortune or anything. So we started with the usual grants, which usually have like you write this long grant application, you wait a year. Well, you find out about that, and if they deny you, you wait a whole nother year and you do it again, and you do that for like 10 different grant apps. We did that. None of that worked. We did Kickstarter, which was great. That really got us started with I think it was something like 300 people backed this project, which I'm so grateful for. And we were able to start shooting some important interviews, especially in New York City, with some experimental filmmakers, including the godfather of avant-garde cinema, Jonas Mekas, and it was incredible. After that, joined forces with some production companies in Switzerland because a lot of the story takes place there, and I'm a dual citizen there. And we pitched to television commissioning editors from around the world in Amsterdam, and we got France, Germany, and Swiss television involved, which helped fund a portion of it. And otherwise, it was pretty much stop and go. As soon as we had a little bit of money, we would continue the actual shooting. I was never stopping. I was doing my research and doing whatever. But as far as the shooting and hiring people, that could only happen when we had funding. So we would fund some and then stop and then go. So it was a little bit of everything. We got an amazing investor at the end that really helped us get to the finish line. But I mean, that was a big reason why it took so long, was raising funding for an artistic project of any sort is always expensive and hard.
Yeah, I get it. But I suppose it took like around 10 years to finish your documentary film, or less than that, around it.
Well, really, it was like 15 off and on, but it was really 10
Yeah.
intense years, with the first 5 with me in
Mhm.
film school just
Mhm.
fumbling around.
I get it.
So yeah.
Do you regret that it took so long for you to finish your project?
I mean, I would have liked it to be shorter. Had I known it
Mhm.
was gonna be so long, would I have done it? I don't know. But I think anything worthwhile, if you know
It takes time,
the
yeah.
hurt and the time that it's gonna take, you would never do it. So I'm glad I didn't know, because then I wouldn't have done it. So I don't regret it. But I'm thankful I didn't know starting out.
I get it. So after that, I'm just curious about what was your inspiration for this documentary? Have you been inspired by other documentaries? Actually, I want to ask that question because as I told you earlier, there's something different, very different, and there's something very unique about your documentary that doesn't look like, or that's not visible in other documentary films. It's not about a camera. It's not about the Bolex. It's not about your parents. I mean, it's not about your grandparents, the inventor of Bolex. It's not only about you and your connection or your relationship with your family roots. I think that there is something much deeper down in the movie, and it's not totally a whole documentary. On the other hand, it's it's like a narrative film, but I cannot define it because it's not a narrative, it's not a documentary. Actually, it's also a documentary film and it's also a narrative film, but the way you made, I mean, the way you put together this film is very different. I mean, I've seen hundreds of, thousands of documentary films, and I see maybe around 1,000 documentary films a year. And yours, I mean, the one you made feels different, more different than the others. That's why I wanted to talk about your documentary. Actually, there are a couple of documentaries or documentary filmmakers that impressed me like that, and you are definitely one of them. And when I first saw your documentary, I thought to myself, if I would be a producer, I would, I would produce her films. This girl is great. She's making good films, and I know that it didn't take. It took a little bit long for you to finish that. But I'm on the other hand very happy that maybe it's how you came to create such a unique and different project, because as I just told you earlier, there are so many documentaries that we are watching every day on TV, on documentary channels, or in the festival screenings, but it's not easy to find a different documentary film. So that was very impressive. And on the other hand, can you please tell me about why your documentary is not only about the Bolex, the camera, but it's also, I mean, why did you choose to name your documentary Beyond the Bolex? Because I can see that you are more interested in more things other than Bolex, because you are more interested in what's surrounding and what's the peripheral things about this camera and about what this camera do to your um, story.
Exactly. I feel like you exactly get what this was. And this wasn't a documentary about the Bolex, which we literally called it Beyond the Bolex, meaning not only the Bolex for that reason. And for some reason, a lot of people are like, oh, it's a movie about the Bolex. I'm like, well, the Bolex is an important part, but yeah, it goes way beyond that. And that was one of the things that was so difficult, was because I was juggling several narrative tracks. We have my journey to get to know my great grandfather and his story. We have his life story as a prolific Renaissance man, inventor, somewhat like a Steve Jobs type, someone who's always looking to the future. How can I change the future? How can I expand the world and change it? And then we have filmmakers, generations of filmmakers maybe almost 100 years, and how this camera helped them develop their craft and change their lives and their careers. But also more than that, it's an emotional story. It's a family story with elements that I think are relatable to other people. You know, living in a family member's shadow. It's, you know, inspiration. It's heartbreak. It's turmoil as far as war and citizenship and immigration and all of that together. And how do you ever write that on a grant application, which is part
Yeah.
of the problem with funding it. But yeah, you know, the vision to make it was hard to get on paper, and it was even harder to get into an edit, which required many re-edits, and luckily I had a great team involved to help me. But
So
I wanted, yeah, go on.
you had a screenplay.
A what?
There is a you wrote a screenplay for the documentary. No, it's not scripted. I mean, the whole thing is just. Have you written a documentary script for the project?
Basically outlines, and then
Yeah.
revising outlines, and then throwing that away, and then doing a new outline, then revising that. In the last phase, when I did a complete re-edit with my final editor, we had a big cork board with different color index cards representing the different threads and themes. And I would just I had that up in my house in a place I'd always walk by. And so I would just kind of look at it and then think, and then I'd move a card around, and then I'd put a new card in, I'd take that card out. So there's so many great scenes that aren't in there because it's not because they're not great, they just didn't fit in the whole puzzle of the thing. But
Well,
that's
then,
kind of how we finished it.
Then could we say that you have walked in your grandparent footsteps? Because I find lots of similarities between you and your grandparent, the inventor of Bolex, because I can see when I watch the documentary that you are the kind of Renaissance person, just like your grandfather, maybe in a way, because you are creating many things together. It's not just one thing that you. I mean, your documentary is on many levels a different project and a different film, and it's like a juxtaposition of different themes, different stories, different perspectives. Because on the other hand, you're telling the story of your grandparent, what he's been through, and on one hand, you're telling what you've been going through when you are searching through your grandparents' story. So it's like a story within story, but in a more different and much deeper way, I think. So maybe that was what was connecting the story and what was connecting you and your grandparent together. So did you think about? I mean, I'm just curious about. Did you happen to watch other documentaries to get inspiration from when you were on the way of making this documentary?
I was always watching documentaries, but I can't think of a specific documentary that really I tried to emulate. I think
I'm asking that because I see that I mean, most filmmakers are one way or another consciously or unconsciously stealing from other filmmakers. But when I watched your documentary, I couldn't find any inspiration from other filmmakers or from other documentaries. It was just like that. That was what I just told you. It looked so unique and it looked so original. So it felt like the whole thing came out from you, from inside to you. Probably there was no other. I mean, the whole inspiration probably was you and your grandparent, and what and the sort of relationship you had established with your story. So there is one final question I want to ask you about. I mean, now you know that cinema and filmmaking is changing and evolving very differently, and the trend is changing very rapidly. So now YouTube or other platforms such as, you know, Netflix or other platforms, digital platforms are very upfront. So are we interested in those platforms, and do you think that those platforms are affecting the industry and the art of cinema and the filmmaking or the documentary filmmaking badly or in a good way? So what are your thoughts about that?
Okay. If you don't mind, I just want to kind of go back to the last question really quickly and add something that I think you'd find interesting, and then come back to this. I might need you to remind me, but I think it is something that interests you. So as far as making the documentary, somewhere around the middle when I was making it, I had a thought. One night it just hit me, and I was thinking about these boxes and boxes of belongings of my great grandfather, films from when he was inventing it in 1927 through when he died in 1962, photographs, everything. You know, he had moved from Europe to the US. I know you can only bring a certain amount of things. You can't save everything. You've got to throw things away. You have to just part with memories and material items. It was curated kind of like today with our, not quite as extreme, you know, with Facebook, with social media. We post what we want to remember, what we like, the good moments. And so I started thinking about everything he left behind being his curated version of his life, the good times mostly. I also had his journal, which he was not only the good times, he wrote about everything. So it was mostly documents showing the good and the bad, and the photographs and the films showing the great. So I called it his symphony in my mind. And I decided that, you know, I was going to conduct it. So that's kind of the relationship I took, is I'm like, this is his symphony and I'm going to conduct it. And that's what I took and I went forward with.
Yeah, I can say that you really conducted a symphony when you made that movie, because I can see that you created a different and very impressive visuals in the movie, and the storyline is also very, you know, gripping and interesting and exciting, at least for my part. And I know that when people watched your documentary at the festival in Istanbul, they were all, I mean, the audience was so happy when they watched that documentary. And I realized that maybe you didn't get that, but some of the audience were talking to themselves, or they were talking among them, and they were saying that, oh, it's so beautifully made documentary film. It's so emotional, and it's so different, and it's so beautiful. People were in the audience were telling about that when you were sitting behind the, you know, curtain. But I think it was not only me that thought that your documentary film is very beautiful. I still recall how the audience was, you know, impressed by your documentary film. And as I've just told you, it's a very different film, because it starts like a narrative, but it turns into, you know, a documentary film. But you kept all the emotions very, you know, balanced. You didn't you didn't push the audience to feel emotional or you know, over sensitive. You just created a beautiful balance of emotions, and I got that when I watched it.
That was exactly what I was trying to do, is start with the symphony, but then go on to verite. You know, go with the my idealized version of his life as I saw through going through his boxes, and then the rest of the documentary is me retracing his step and getting a sense of reality a little bit. You know, not that his wasn't reality, but taking it a step further into reality. And so although I'm conducting his symphony, it's also through my lens, which was another difficult part, because near the end when I was editing, I went to my family. I don't think I put in those interviews, but they were great. I asked each of my family members, I said, I'm worried that when you see this documentary, you won't recognize him, because my version of him won't be what you remembered when you were 10 or 12, or, you know, before he passed away. And a couple of them just said, you know, we all have a version of everyone in our lives. So this film is me conducting his symphony through my own lens.
Well, I think as an audience, I should say that I really enjoyed your film, and I'm very, eager, and I'm just impatient to watch it again. I hope I will soon be watching it once again, and I recommend everybody to see this beautiful documentary film. As I've just told you, it's not a documentary about Bolex. It's a documentary film. It's a narrative film beyond the Bolex, just as the name dictates, and it's a beautiful story. It's a really very unique and lovely story, and I should thank you for joining this nice talk and telling us about your story with your own filmmaking adventure. And I wish you a very good and happy and nice journey during your filmmaking career. So I'd just like to thank you for accepting my offer to join this conversation. Thank you very much, Alice. Alyssa. So I hope you liked our short Zoom meeting too. So are there any final things you want to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you and thank everyone for watching. And if they do want to see the film, they can go to our website, which is www.beyondthebolex, that's BOLEX.com, and click the watch button, and it'll tell you if there's a screening going on right now. There is one going on between November 30th and December 4th, if you happen to catch this in time. If not, if you check that button, you can see when you can next see it. But I just want to thank everyone and thank you for having me on. It's been a lot of fun.
Well, thank you again, and hoping to see you next time with your next movie, with your next documentary film. So bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.